When I say post-apocalypse, what comes to your mind? Probably something like the ravaged wastes of Mad Max, or perhaps the idealist nuclear 50s of Fallout. These barren, war-torn landscapes that more turn the entirety of the planet, or at least those regions, into battlefields, where we're reduced to our most primal instincts, and wars and battles are constantly taking place. What you probably don't think about is an obscure indie game from 2017. A little game called Rain World. Rain World probably doesn't fall under your general definition of a post-apocalypse. However, it fits enough of the criteria that I would like to say it counts, and it depicts my favorite type of one. In Rain World, by the time your gameplay takes place, an intelligent species who shaped the world and landscapes, the Ancients, have all since gone extinct. Through choices of their own, they are all no longer on the planet to maintain their infrastructure and large-scale constructs that fill the land, which has led to everything being in a state of decay. What remains are crumbling structures, drainage pipes now overgrown, and abandoned facilities. What I am saying is that Rain World, while maybe not being literally post-apocalyptic, has the qualities of one. The most important being that it takes place in a now dying world. With the Ancients no longer providing upkeep, there's effectively a clock on Rain World, and the effects of time can be felt throughout your playing of the game. Rain World actually has a lot of deep lore that provides a lot of explanations for who the Ancients were, what they did, why they disappeared. But I actually don't think that's relevant for what I want to discuss in this video. What I'd like to make note of is how in your played experience of Rain World, you learn to love a dying world. For taking place in a dying world, Rain World actually has a lot of life in it. There are all sorts of creatures, both prey and predators, that fill the environments. The one you play as, the Slugcat, isn't even really the last of its kind or anything like that, which kind of throws a wrench in the way I describe Rain World as being near death. Generally, when you'd think of a world being dead, there are probably only a handful of living species still around, and they aren't going to be sticking around for that much longer. However, I think Rain World's ecosystem actually helps the world feel more decrepit, as opposed to less. To give an example, there's an area in the game, the Shoreline, which in the background depicts very striking pixel art of a collapsed structure that, as many have described, really gives a sense of melancholy. It's only machinery, but you can't help but feel bad for it at this point. It doesn't serve any significance to the player. Hell, you may never even connect the dots as to what it may have once been. And still, as a player, you just feel it once had importance, and now it's nothing but rubble in the background. To contrast this striking background, though, lurking below you around here is probably the mighty Leviathan, a terrifying mix of biology and machinery that will probably just eat you right then and there. I think this scene is one of the strongest examples of the point of Rain World. This dying, once impressive world is genuinely beautiful, but it is now filled with the deadliest of the deadly. It is a ruthless environment with countless creatures that want nothing more than to eat. Note that I didn't say they want to eat you. They'd love to eat you, but they don't really care what they eat specifically. This is part of what makes the ecosystem in Rain World so incredible compared to other games. What makes it really click is that it isn't player-centric. All of the creatures on the map are constantly doing their own thing through an absurdly advanced system of procedural AI that makes everything feel uncannily lifelike. If the player happens to be nearby, sure, they'll go for you, but otherwise they just mind their business. This ties back into helping the world both feel dead and alive, because like I described earlier, you're facing this contrast of genuinely lifelike creatures up against decrepit, run-down environments. If you're only presented with one or the other, either these vast, empty landscapes that held plenty of meaning on their own, but didn't have much going on in them besides the aesthetic, or a dense, bustling ecosystem of lifelike creatures that all behave like real animals, you'd have a good game. Hell, a great game even. But Rainworld's ability to pair the two systems to make these lifelike animals behave realistically in their struggle to survive in a world that has long since abandoned them, it amplifies the feeling of everything. I'm now realizing that I actually forgot to mention a pretty important aspect of what makes life in Rainworld so harsh. It's in the title there. The rain. For reasons that I could explain but won't, every little while the entirety of Rainworld is plunged into a torrential downpour that will just destroy anything left out in the open. The only hope of anything surviving these events is to find a shelter and hibernate past it all. However, to hibernate, you need food, and this is where I finally, after far too long, get to tell you about what the gameplay loop of Rainworld is. Simply, you have to find enough food to hibernate, then find your way to a shelter that's hopefully far enough away from your last one so it feels like some progress was made. All you know while playing is that you want to go somewhere. Where? Who knows? But away from where you start. The journey and loop will take you through countless areas, but eventually you'll find yourself generating a genuine connection to this world. You'll start to feel and understand what makes life here tick, how everything works, and suddenly you're now immersed in this ecosystem. Except you're constantly being reminded that life is cruel, and in a dead world, there is nothing but harshness left for you. Every trip for food is a struggle, every battle is life or death. You're past the times of flourishing and rewards. Rainworld is a very lonely game. Despite being surrounded by life, so few of it isn't looking to constantly eat you. However, there are some times where you can find allies in the harsh world. Scavengers are pretty much the only other intelligent life left by the time your journey takes place. They can communicate with you through gestures, and if you're nice to them, will trade with you. And if you're really nice to them, they'll even follow you around and help you get to where you want to go. They live on very advanced AI, and they really feel like another intelligent species, just like the slug cat you play as. They act as if they have genuine wants and needs. They notice and remember what you do. I think one of my favorite things about scavengers is if they're under attack, say a vulture is trying to snatch up one of them. If you help them fight it off, they'll gain more respect for you. It's a small thing, but it genuinely makes them feel more like an ally since you don't even have to give them things to make them like you. You can help them in other ways. The scavengers, though, aren't always friendly. Most of the time they'll start neutral, or in some cases they're outright aggressive. And when on the offense in combat, they are just about as smart as you would think they are. Their unreliability, though, only makes them fit into this harsh world more realistically. Consider you're one of them, where pretty much everything else in your region is looking to eat you. I doubt you'd be the most trusting of anything, even things that act initially non-hostile. They're just doing their best to survive, just like you. And I'm sure that many players also initially assumed they were threats when first encountering scavengers. With all of these somber elements, you're starting to probably get pretty damn confused how I ever discussed the idea of thriving and loving Rainworld. Well, I think that sadness is really what makes life in it feel special. The worst has happened, and the world is dying. Life is absurdly difficult, and every other room promises death for the slug cat. But still they feel obligated to push through it. I've said earlier that at this point, we are past the times of flourishing, but what if you flourished anyway? The love of life that can be found in Rainworld are those times where despite everything, you find yourself thriving. Whether it be a successful hunt, you make it out alive in a desperate chase, you witness an impressive life form, or maybe you just take in the breathtaking scenery. Whatever it is that makes you feel like you've reached some success, the feeling is there, and it's strong. Rainworld is very powerful in making any positives feel like they're the biggest thing that's ever happened in your life because of how miserable everything else can feel. Which you'd assume means that these moments are few and far between. Well, not necessarily. See, when you're starting in Rainworld, you will probably rarely make it out of any confrontations alive. Even the most basic of enemies that can go on the chase at the start, the green lizards, are still smart enough to know how to flank you or wait it out and stand between you and where you want to go. Worth mentioning that most of the times you get caught by a creature, you're probably guaranteed to die. Easy failure plus inexperienced gameplay means that, yeah, you'll die and struggle a lot. This is how a new player will find those times of success to make them feel good. After finding failure so many times, figuring out that yes, you can kill the lizards. Yes, you have found another shelter. It feels so refreshing. But of course, not every player stays new forever. Eventually, you'll develop a mastery of the weird intricacies in Rainworld's combat and movement. Eventually, lizards are no longer threats, but instead are opportunities. By this point as a player, you've probably already fallen in love with Rainworld and its dead landscapes. You've experienced so much of it that you'll either have given up on the game or be a superfan. You fought through the struggle and found yourself at the top of the food chain, where you feel like an apex predator. Except one of the genius parts of Rainworld is that you never really do become that apex predator. Even when you've developed true mastery and prowess, in which you can handily combat anything, you're still no hero. You're just a scug, and a scug is always vulnerable. This innate vulnerability is what keeps you grounded, though. I believe that if pure technical expertise led to the player being borderline invincible, it would take them out of the game's world. The consistent and forced connection allows one to never feel above everything else surrounding them. Yet, it does let them reevaluate their perspective. It allows the player to feel enriched in their surroundings, not afraid and not indifferent, but engaged in everything. Rainworld achieves a connection between player and world that few other games have ever pulled off. The first achievement you can gain in Rainworld is called Survivor. The description of it is, you've made this land your home. To actually obtain this, you have to hibernate at max karma 5 times, which for a new player probably seems impossible. Yet, by the time you'll be capable of doing this, you really have made this land your home. You've memorized the pathways and pipelines, learned where some of the safest or most reliable food sources are, and have bested the trials that stand before you. To summarize, what I've been trying to express is that Rainworld makes you fall in love with a dying world because the way mechanical improvement occurs in it with the environments really does force you to make it your home, and in turn fall in love with it. And then Downpour comes in. Where Rainworld baseline has you fall in love with and grow immersed in its world, Downpour has you live and breathe it, eventually becoming one with the world. Rainworld Downpour introduces 5 new slug cats with their own campaigns and abilities, each of which will require you to grow immersed in a new lifestyle and will rewrite your brain on how you view survival. The most important detail is that all of the slug cats have varying needs and abilities. This means that counting the Survivor and Hunter from vanilla as 2 different playstyles, you have a whopping 7 entirely different mantras to assume while navigating Rainworld. Your strategy for how you decide to eat, how you decide to fight, where you decide to explore, it's going to be vastly different. Take the Rivulet, who is extremely speedy and can hold their breath for long times, granting them nearly unmatched agility and finesse in juking out enemies. However, in their time, the rainfalls occur with very little breathing room in between, forcing you to use that speed instead of engaging in combat, because any wasted moments will probably leave you stranded out in the rain, and no amount of gills can save you from being crushed under the torrents. This leads to a lifestyle of passing by everything and scavenging whatever you can along the way. But compare this to someone like the Artificer, who is pretty much entirely living in a state of combat. She takes on every situation head first and uses her explosives to make sure nothing stands in her way. Even without a weapon, she fights until her last breath, with her explosive burst that can knock down and away all creatures around you, or she'll just maul things with, her mouth. She lives in this state of constant combat, both because of her abilities, but also because of her situation. For reasons that I won't say because spoilers, scavengers are permanently at max aggression towards her. I've described earlier how scavengers can alter the game, and let me tell you, when they're constantly trying to kill you, you really feel and understand how they're such an advanced life form. They'll send hit squads after you, meaning that most rooms you waltz into, there's a chance of a group of scavs ready to hunt you down and kill you with a single well-placed spear. They also employ stronger elite scavengers, which can leap to reach you in places others can't. Basically, you have to be on high alert constantly, because if you aren't, then the smartest predator out there will turn you into a corpse. This changes your mindset towards everything, because when you're constantly combating scavs, it'll make you start to gain that little sense of bloodlust. And with that bloodlust, you'll begin to start killing other creatures just for violence's sake. Lizards, spiders, centipedes, nothing is spared against the Artificer. She walks a path of violence, and as such, her karma level is permanently stuck at level 1, which represents violence. But don't worry, a scav's corpse can let you still trick the gates. After following a path of blood for long enough, you'll get directed to the Metropolis, an abandoned city that has since grown overrun with scavengers. The Metropolis really evokes that exact vibe I love when considering a dead or dying world. You're exploring a once highly populated space, one that surely held huge cultural significance, in which no doubt countless innovations were held. And now it's nothing but towers of stone and metal, nothing more than an obstacle course for the wildlife. The scavengers are almost using it for what it was originally built for, but even then, it's really being repurposed. There's really something truly magical about desolate cities like this. Plenty of other forms of media have evoked them, and it always hits me the same way every time. I'm not sure what the exact words are to describe it even. There's just something haunting and beautiful about them. And Rainworld depicts this haunting beauty with its constant level of elegance. The threat music now has warning sirens in it. The backgrounds are dense and filled with buildings. You really grow immersed in this quiet city. By the time you'll reach the final Slugcat, the Saint, you'll have experienced so many different methods and lifestyles that Rainworld will feel like second nature to you. At this point, the player feels so highly adapted to its harsh environment that it is a part of them. Here's a small spoiler warning. The Saint is intended to be the final campaign you experience in Rainworld. I won't cover any story details, but some people still may prefer to witness this blind, so click to here if you'd like to skip past this. The Saints campaign takes place during a harsh winter, long after the events of any previous campaigns. The world is far more decayed and run down than experienced before, and every region is given a new name to match its winter coat. The Saint, as its name implies, is a good Samaritan and won't/can't engage in combat. This means spears are useless for them, and eating living creatures is off the table as well, restricting their options for food even further. To make up for their pacifist nature, the Saint has a grappling hook of a tongue that is absurdly powerful. This really lets you circumvent the need for any combat, as you can just blaze past enemies with easily the fastest and most maneuverable Slugcat. At this point in the Rainworld timeline, pretty much only the fittest have survived. You'll either be dealing with highly adapted wildlife, or just the overtly strongest. That means lots of red centipedes and lizards galore. And watch out for the Miros vultures. The goal in the Saints campaign is one that I won't tell you the specifics of, but it basically requires you to explore almost the entire map, at least a little bit. This should feel like a monumental task, similar to that of your first campaign as a survivor. Yet there are two things that make it extremely doable. The first of which is that extra movement I already described. I really cannot overstate how fast the Saint is. The second, that I've also said before, is that by this point in Rainworld, the map has become a part of you. You can probably navigate from any point A to any point B like you've lived in the ecosystem your entire life. Further than love, further than living and breathing it, you are one with Rainworld, and you get to experience some of its final death rattles. Seeing the world in this state, with the connection the player has developed to it, it really hits extra hard. I mentioned earlier how much I love this ruined urban aesthetic, but to make it Snowstruck, it really ticks all of my boxes. But also, without spoiling specifics, Certain important areas are seen in completely unprecedented states of disarray that when I first witnessed, I was genuinely in shock. When playing the Saints campaign, you learn that Rainworld is nearing the end of its life cycle, and we get to witness its graceful conclusion. Rainworld is a game like no other, and I highly urge anyone who this sounded interesting to give it a try. Do understand that I was not overstating the brutality and difficulty though. Rainworld is as harsh as it gets, but it's something truly beautiful and special. Also, it's really like Girls' Last Tour, huh?